How can a nearly $2 billion lawsuit settlement affect you when it's your time to sell or buy a home? Welcome to the Orlando Real Estate Lifestyle, where we explore the intersection of Orlando real estate and your best life. I'm Phil Kruse, here to help you make the most out of your journey right here in the city beautiful. You may have heard about this NAR lawsuit. NAR is the National Realtor Association, obviously a nationwide entity, and therefore affects us right here in Orlando in the state of Florida. If you haven't heard about it, you might be thinking, well, why is Phil waiting until now to let me know? This is a lawsuit that's been going on since 2023. At least that's when the settlement was handed down. The verdict was handed down to the tune of $1.8 billion against the National Association of Realtors. And it's taken this long. Here we are in, as of this recording, early August 2024, for it to finally settle into reality. And that's why I waited till now. You as a consumer, if you're going to buy a home, if you're going to sell a home, you're going to be affected by this lawsuit in the way that you do business especially with real estate agents. So I already mentioned that the National Association of Realtors had to pay $1.8 billion in settlement charges that may go up for some crazy law that I don't fully understand. Maybe one of you lawyers' friends can help me out with that. But I also wanted to say that it's going to affect how the commissions are listed on the MLS. Okay, the MLS is the multiple listing service. It's an extremely important tool used by real estate agents and by consumers. It's what Zillow uses in Realtor.com. I'll get more into the MLS later. So relative to this lawsuit, I'm going to cover topics such as how it affects sellers, how it affects buyers of residential real estate, how it affects real estate agents like myself, and of course, what is the MLS? I'm going to provide you guys some context first before explaining how it's going to affect you, because you are going to need a little bit of basic background knowledge on how it used to work to understand how things are going to change moving forward. Now, in case it wasn't obvious, I am a real estate agent, and one of my main lead sources are listeners like you. So when it's your time to buy or sell a home, keep me in mind. Phil Kruse with a K, that's Kruse. Or if you're talking to a friend or having a beer with a family member and real estate comes up, let them know that your boy Phil Kruse here in Orlando has got their back. And a portion of every single real estate transaction I do, my commissions, a portion of them go to support charity. I mentor and volunteer at the New Image Youth Center in downtown Orlando, right there in Paramore, supporting the underprivileged youth of that area. And I choose to donate a portion of my commissions to that with every transaction. Or if you have a charity that you are involved with or passionate about, I will absolutely send my donation to that charity. So I actually give you the choice. If you want to find out more about what I do and more lifestyle tips about Orlando, yes, this is a real estate podcast today, but this particular, my podcast in general is about Orlando real estate, but it's also about lifestyle and all things Orlando. I interview business leaders, restaurateurs like the owner of Pig Floyd, Thomas Ward. I interviewed the poet laureate of the city of Orlando, Sean Welcome. So it's a very diverse podcast. Jump on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe. I'm also on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, great. If you're not, go check it out on YouTube. Subscribe there as well. Leave me some comments, say hi. And don't forget about my social media channels. I'm all over with all kinds of useful tips. I provide a weekend update basically every Friday that tells you what's going on in Orlando, my five favorite things going on in Orlando. So find me on Instagram @_ Phil Kruse. Again, that's Kruse with a K. Facebook, again, YouTube. So just Google me, Phil Kruse, Kruse. Put real estate, put Orlando. You're going to find me. Hit me up. I'm here to help you. I'm a listing specialist. I'll help your home sell fast and at the highest price. I actually have an entire podcast episode dedicated to it. It's about the auction effect. Let me know if you're interested. I'd love to help you and send a portion of my commissions of working with you to charity. Okay, so enough with the shameless plugs. Let's provide some context for you. Maybe you've bought and sold a home before, or maybe you've only done one or the other. Maybe you purchased from a new construction builder, so maybe you have a different experience. But what you need to understand for the sake of this conversation is, what is the MLS? What is the multiple listing service? The multiple listing service is the software platform that all real estate agents that are licensed and members of the Orlando Real Estate Association are required to post their listings. Okay. And so that's where we put that description that you read on realtor.com and Zillow and all the information about the home. A real estate agent physically enters that in, or their assistant enters that into the MLS. Now, the MLS gets paid by all the websites you can imagine that have all that same information. Think Zillow.com, Realtor.com, Redfin, or any private brokerage or real estate agent website that you use that has that information. They pay what's called an IDX. It's like a plugin to get that information from the MLS. So the MLS is extremely important. It's really a gatekeeper to all the listing information out there, and they operate all over the country. There's each MLS is relatively independent. They're regional, location specific, but they all are under the umbrella of the MLS, or Multiple Listing Service Corporation. So on the MLS, it shows how, if you're representing a buyer, it shows the buyer's agent how they're getting paid. At least it did. Okay, that's how it used to be. So if I was showing you a home, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer out there, and you ask, hey, Phil, we want to see these two houses on Saturday, I would jump on the MLS. I would print out the information for you if you wanted that. We'd look at all the information. I would see the seller's disclosure and all that stuff that's there that you need to know. And then there's a section for realtors only that does not get sent to realtor.com or Zillow.com. And it's the compensation. Okay. It's how the buyer's agent is getting paid. The paradigm has been for the longest time, decades, that the seller ends up paying vis-a-vis, the seller pays the buyer's agent a commission. If you look at the listing agreement, what it actually is happening is when you sign a listing agreement as a seller, you're actually agreeing to pay the listing agent or their broker a commission. So let's just use 6% as an example. You might be signing on the listing agreement that you're agreeing to pay the listing agent or their broker a 6% commission if they sell your house. Then there's a separate section on the listing agreement that says, of that 6%, you as the seller are agreeing to pay maybe 3% to the buyer's broker. If that's what you agree to as a seller, when your listing agent goes on the MLS and enters in the information, they're going to put in the realtor only section in the compensation section that the buyer's agent is going to be paid 3%. So in reality, it's not the seller paying the buyer's agent. It's actually the listing agent or their broker paying the broker's agent, or the buyer's agent. But it's really just a shell game. Obviously, the 6% is all coming in that example. That money is all coming from the seller. Now, the seller generally doesn't pay that out of pocket. They pay it from the proceeds or the profit of the sale of their home. So they don't feel it as much. Certainly, they make less money, but us real estate agents are absolutely worth it. You listening out there know, if you've had a good or bad experience, how good a good real estate agent is. And believe it or not, with the NAR lawsuit going through and NAR losing and paying out $1.8 billion, the MLS is also being sued. I'll explain to you why. The reason both have been sued is because the plaintiffs claim that the consumer, the person selling their house, has been misled over time, and there's been collusion in the industry that basically has forced the seller to pay the buyer's agent and their broker. In that example, I used 3%. Of course, those percentages could be anything. They could be zero. They could be a flat dollar fee. But that is the general idea. So let's just move on and say, what does this mean for you if you're someone who is selling your house? I can tell you this, you're going to have the same listing agreement. You're going to have that same section that says how much you're willing to pay your listing agent, usually in a percentage. And then there's going to be a separate section that says how much you're willing of that to share with a buyer's agent if they bring a buyer to the table. So from that perspective, nothing's going to change. And this is why it gets kind of funny with the lawsuit, because from a seller, from that perspective, it's not going to change the way you do business with your listing agent. You always could negotiate that. So let's just use that 6% as an example again. You always, as a seller, have had the opportunity to negotiate with the listing agent say, no, 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 I'm not willing to pay 6%. I'm willing to pay 5%. Or I'm not willing to compensate the buyer's agent with 3%. I'm willing to compensate the buyer's agent with 2.5 or 2%. That's always been the case. What they argue in the lawsuit is that a slick, fast talking listing agent who comes in to your home, and I'm sure some of you out there who've sold homes in the past have run into these folks, and they come and they ramrod you with a slick, psychological based presentation that basically gets you to sign their listing agreement at the end. And next thing you know, you're locked into a 6-month term or whatever it is of working with that listing agent. Maybe they didn't completely explain the listing presentation to you. Maybe you didn't fully understand what you were reading. Next thing you know, you're paying that percentage to them, and you're paying a percentage to the buyer's agent. And when the home sells, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't agree to that. To me, that example is pretty rare, because I like to believe that consumers, you listening, are smart and that wouldn't happen to you. But there are extremely talented and frankly unethical sales folks out there that can manipulate the best of us. So even if that did happen to you, I'm not saying that you're not smart, but I do respect you as a buyer or seller. And certainly that's not the way I would have ever done business. But there are people out there like that. So you have the same opportunity to pay your listing agent. You have the same opportunity to pay your buyer's agent. So where does it even differ for you as a seller? What it does is it makes you as a seller more aware of what's going on. So maybe you're more likely to negotiate the compensation structure with your listing agent than vis-a-vis the buyer's agent. There is going to be an extra document that you will have to sign at some point. Okay, it's required now by the Florida Real Estate Association. So you have the National Association of Realtors, the Florida Real Estate Association, and then you have the Orlando Real Estate Association. Yes, it can be expensive to be a real estate agent because you have to pay dues to these organizations. Okay. The extra document you're going to have to sign is basically at the end. When the buyer's agent submits an offer, for the buyer they represent onto your home, they're also going to include a document, a compensation document that you as the seller are going to sign that basically states, yes, I am aware and I am agreeing to pay the buyer's agent and or their broker whatever was stated on the listing agreement, 2%, 2.5%, 3%, whatever it is, a flat fee. And the listing agent is bound ethically to send the listing agent, bound ethically to send the listing agreement to the buyer's agent or the broker if they request it. So we can always see that, oh, yep, the seller put on the listing agreement that they're agreeing to pay this amount of money and everything. So really, as a seller, nothing changes other than you're going to have to sign that extra document at the end, and that you maybe are more educated on the situation. What it means for buyers. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated, and people were really freaking out at the beginning when the lawsuit came down. People were worried that buyers were going to have to pay more to buy a house. People were worried that buyers are going to have to pay their buyer's agents directly. They thought that this meant there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation. They thought people were saying that, oh, this means sellers no longer have to pay the buyer's agent to buy their home. That was always the case. It's always been the case that you as a seller can do a for sale by owner. It's always been the case that you as a seller can negotiate how much you want to pay the listing agent and or a buyer's agent. So that hasn't changed. So I never thought that that was going to happen. I always assumed this was how it's going to be. More paperwork and an extra step for a buyer's agent. So again, how does it affect buyers? If you're looking to buy a home and you are going to use a real estate agent, as most buyers do, you are now going to have to sign another form, a form up front that basically says, I am agreeing to work with this buyer's agent, and I am agreeing to pay or not pay the buyer's agent. And so the Florida Real Estate Association, this may differ elsewhere in the country, but the Florida Real Estate Association now requires that if I'm going to show you a home as a buyer, I have to have that document signed up front. It's almost like a listing agreement. Now I can put $0, which is what I'm going to do, because nothing's going to change. Generally speaking, the sellers will end up paying in some way, shape, or form the buyer's agent. So if I'm representing you as a buyer, I'm going to have you sign that agreement. I'm going to say, look, you don't need to pay me. Let's hope that the sellers are still agreeing to pay me as a buyer's agent. Since it's not going to be listed on the MLS anymore, it will likely benefit you more as a buyer. There are agents out there, believe it or not, and this is really just human nature, right? They would go, let's say you have 3 houses or 4 houses or 5 houses you wanted to see on a Saturday. There's unethical buyer's agents that would go on the MLS. They would look at the percentages or commissions being paid to the buyer's agent and say, hey, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, let's only see these 3 homes over here. These other 2, they're not for you. You don't want to see those. Well, maybe you do want to see those, but the buyer's agent knows that, hey, they're not paying very much, so I'm not going to show you that home. So it is good in the sense that not having the commission shown on the multiple listing service will force any unethical buyer agents out there to show you the home anyway. Is it really though? Because it's only a text message away. This is why it's kind of silly. It's just an extra step. If I want to know how much the compensation is for me as a buyer's agent, I'm not going to be able to see it on the MLS. But when I request the showing, or I can just call or reach out to the real estate agent and say, what's the commission? Are the sellers agreeing to pay? Okay. It doesn't say, the lawsuit doesn't say that sellers can't pay a buyer's agent. Nope, doesn't say that. All it says is they can't put the commission structure on the multiple listing service. That's really all it is. And some extra documentation is going to be required. So as a buyer, it in the short term should not affect you. Listing agreements have already been signed, and I don't anticipate anything changing. The listing agreements haven't changed. I don't anticipate sellers choosing not to compensate the buyer's agent. I think sellers generally see the value in the listing agent and a buyer's real estate agent for that, and that's not going to change. And look at a for sale by owner situation. Those people still exist. There's people that say, I can do this myself. I'm not going to hire a listing agent. I'm not going to pay their commission. I'm not going to pay the commission to a buyer's agent. They decide to do it for sale by owner. You see the signs, okay? There's that system already available. Nothing's changed in that regard. And there's for sale by owners that see the value in the buyer's agent. Yeah, they're representing themselves, so they're not going to pay a commission to the listing agent. But most for sale by owners that I've dealt with in my career are offering a buyer's agent compensation. You call them, they say, hey, I call them, say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my buyer wants to see your house. Are you offering compensation to a buyer's agent? They've always said yes to me. Now, I know for sure there's examples that the for sale by owner sellers are saying, no, we're not offering compensation to you as a buyer's agent. We're trying to save money. Then that's when the conversation happens between the buyer's agent and the buyer you're representing to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the seller, in this case, it's rare, but the seller doing a for sale by owner is not willing to pay me to broker this transaction. So we have to negotiate some sort of term so that I, as your buyer's agent, can get paid. And that's where that section of that document that you're going to have to sign as a buyer, that's why it's there. There'll be some verbiage that I would have put in that if I'm not getting compensated by the seller or by the listing agent's broker, that we're going to have an opportunity to negotiate my compensation. And maybe I'll even outline exactly what that is. So you're going to have to sign that document. This could benefit the buyer's agent. This document that you're going to have to sign as a buyer that says you're working with that particular buyer's agent, it's designed to protect you as a buyer, but in reality, it could hurt you because the that buyer agreement, that buyer agent agreement has a time period, a timestamp on it. Okay, so you might be signing a document that says you're working with this real estate agent for 6 months. Well, what if you want to can that real estate agent after the first month because they're not responsive or whatever? You're going to have to get a cancellation document for them. It could be a mess. So you want to make sure that you are working with a real estate agent that's ethical, that is explaining to you the timeframes, that's willing to cancel if you guys have some sort of a disagreement. But it's also going to create loyalty. It's going to benefit the real estate agent because you as a buyer out there, we know how people are. It's human nature that you might not be committed to a real estate agent. Maybe it's your friend or your family member, and you're like, I'm just gonna work with them because I want them to get paid instead of some other random person I don't know. And or you are working with 3 real estate agents. You call them and say, whoever can give me the best properties or whoever's available to show me the house on this Saturday at the last minute, I'm gonna work with them. It's gonna make your job a little bit harder to do that as a buyer. And you're gonna have to take an extra few minutes to think about, do I really wanna work with this buyer's agent? Because it's going to have a mechanism now to create loyalty for you to be loyal to us as buyer's agents. Because I can tell you as a buyer's agent, Nothing hurts your feelings more and bothers you more than when you've been working with a buyer for 3, 4 months, only to find out you went on vacation for 1 week and they decided to go buy a house with a different agent. It's tough. Um, so just keep that in mind. Now, you may see smaller agents and brokers leaving the market. So, how is it going to affect the average real estate agent? I just explained to you in simple terms. The listing agent might have to do more explaining. The listing agent, the buyer's agents are going to have to produce a little bit more paperwork, especially on the buyer's side. But what this may do is this may get rid of those, fast talking, high pressure listing agents, or it's going to reduce their effectiveness. This may get rid of the part-time real estate agents that are just doing it here and there. They're transactional, they're not generating relationships. And guess what? They're not professional, they're not doing the best job. You may be leaving money on the table when you sell your house. You may not be getting the best home or the best experience or the best price if you're buying a home. So the cream will rise. I think. I think this is going to help knock off the dead wood and cut the fat. I can use all kinds of analogies here. Okay. A lot of them are food related, apparently, to get rid of these part-time or unprofessional or unethical real estate agents. And look, there's no creativity allowed on the multiple listing service or MLS to try and show how much commission you're paying. This is kind of an inside joke with real estate agents. I've seen one where it's like, oh, of course it's a joke, an AI generated image of an aerial shot of a home where they pretended that somebody took a lawnmower and mowed in 3% or into the lawn, or some sort of code embedded into the description that says how much compensation is getting paid. It's all funny, but it's not allowed. You're going to get fined. You're going to maybe lose your license, and it's just not necessary. It's a call or text away for a real estate agent to find out if and what the compensation structure is for the seller to them or to the broker. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted. I did my best to try and keep this as consumer specific as possible. Look, real estate agents aren't going anywhere. We have loads of value. Anybody who has had any sort of a real estate related issue, and frankly, that's where a lot of sales folks prove their worth, is when there's a problem, right? If everything goes super smooth, you as a seller, you as a buyer may be like, man, that was really easy. Did I even need a real estate agent? Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of other people out there that something has gone wrong and they're like, thank goodness I had this awesome real estate agent that either helped me solve these super stressful problems, or had tactics to help my house sell fast and at the highest price, or had tactics to learn how to let me live in my house for an extra month after I sell it, or win a bidding war using things like escalation clauses and flexing their muscles as a good real estate agent to convince a listing agent or a seller to work with their buyer due to the quality of their team and their ability to do real estate. Also, we live in Orlando. Orlando is such a hot market, a hot real estate market. We have thousands of people literally moving to the state of Florida every single day. And Orlando is the #1 growing city in the state of Florida, with the largest airport in the state. We're the most visited city in the entire United States, if you include domestic travel. Orlando's not going anywhere, and real estate agents are needed for both locals and for out of town buyers. So, so don't forget about my real estate services. Obviously, you can tell I'm a high level professional real estate agent. A portion of all my commissions go to charity. I love supporting the New Image Youth Center. I'll support your charity. I'm a listing specialist, but I definitely work with buyers. I live on a lake. I specialize in doing lake home transactions. I specialize working with new construction builders, especially the big corporate builders. You can negotiate the prices with them. You could take advantage of their incentives, get lower interest rates, buy quick move-in homes that are ready to move in. I know the whole process. And jump, if you like this information, jump on your podcast platform, like and subscribe. I drop new episodes every Monday. Text the link, send it to a friend, or go on YouTube, like and subscribe there if you want to watch it there. And don't forget about me on social media. I'm extremely active. I'm going to give you updates on everything going on in Orlando, and updates on the real estate market, and some fun stuff too, and maybe even some life coaching tips along the way. I am a super health focused person, including mindfulness and living your best life right here in Orlando. And with that said, always know that your best life in Orlando is within reach. Keep embracing every moment. Cheers. I'll see you next time.